All right, we are live. So yeah, when I was asked to do this, so people, as you're joining now, we're going to actually start the podcast here momentarily. But yeah, when I was asked to do this, like I was excited for the season. I thought the Bears were going to be at least competing for a playoff spot at this point,
Yeah.
and then like I honestly forgot about it. And then like a week and a half ago, I was like, oh, that's right. I remember I was going to do this. And I was like, oh, this will be fun. So, all right. Well, let's just jump in here. So let's get the podcast rolling. We'll get it going down in 3, 2, 1. Welcome into the post-game show. Not your average Bears post-game show for not your average Bears team. They are far, far, far below average. I'm hosting tonight in for Mason West. It's Bill Zimmerman, and with me tonight is Bryan Orenchuk. You can hear him regularly on the Second City Gridiron channel on the Bears Over Beers podcast show. Bryan, let's just jump into this. This was
oh boy.
I wish I could say like this was a surprise. We thought the Bears were going to make this interesting. It was going to be anybody's game in the fourth quarter, but sadly, a very predictable result here.
Yeah, I mean, you said it is predictable. Once Braxton Jones got declared out, we kind of knew what to expect with Karan. They had a good pass rush on our healthy offensive line. And if you can't protect the quarterback, can't do much. It's a battle of the trenches, and our trenches are weak, and theirs are strong. So, not much to be, disappointing or surprised by, rather, tonight. But it doesn't hurt any less, Bill. I mean, it's been years of this, and it doesn't hurt any less, which I think means that we as Bears fans remain the best fans there are. But it still sucks big time.
Oh yeah, it's rough. And I like that you brought up they have strong trenches and the Bears do not. And I think that's going to be a key point we're going to have to talk about here. But there's several things I want to get into during the podcast. Obviously, we're going to talk about Caleb Williams, the good and the bad there. And there was a lot of bad today, unfortunately, for Caleb. And we want to talk about the trenches. This is all going to lead to a conversation about Ryan Poles and some of his decisions and selections. But before we do that, I want to get into coaching. And when I say some of these things, and I've said this in my articles, I've said this in my Bears Banter podcast, that I do believe that Thomas Brown was the right call to be the interim head coach. Okay. And I think the right call was to fire Matt Eberflus. So this is not any kind of a knock on the decision, whether it was Ryan Poles' or Kevin Warren's, both, whoever, it doesn't matter. I think the right call was Thomas Brown, and for multiple reasons. One, you're going to interview him in January. You knew you were going to interview him in January, so you get this tryout here. And I get the people saying, yeah, but now it's going to detract away from the offense. He's going to have more to do. Well, Caleb Williams 5 games versus making sure you have the coach right for Caleb Williams years 2, 3, and 4, far more important to me. So Thomas Brown was the right call to me. I've talked to people. They've said Richard Hightower, not really head coach material. Washington's going to be elevated if you try him from never calling defensive plays. He's going to do that and become the head coach all at the same time. Like there were a lot of things, they didn't have a good pick for interim head coach. So give Thomas Brown the shot there. Yeah. But the way this team is coached, and I'm not necessarily talking about scheme and rhythm of play calling and things like that, but some of the decisions that have happened with Thomas Brown here, and of course they were flat last week against San Francisco, and I'm going to bring up 2 things here that I'm going to point to coaching, although one of them may be more on the player. And that is one, when they went for it on 4th down to start the game, and I know they were in their own territory, and look, you want to be aggressive? I'm all for being aggressive. I don't like being aggressive that far in my own territory, but I'm not gonna fault it. You're lost 7 in a row. Let's go. Let's try something.
Right.
You're gonna do toss sweep on 4th and 1 behind Karan Amagaji, your rookie left tackle. You're not going to go behind Pryor and Wright. You're not going to go behind Tevin Jenkins and Shelton up the. You're going to go behind Amagaji. The one place you should not go there, Brian, is behind a toss sweep with your rookie left tackle. And that's what they did. And no kidding, it didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say is our interior might be worse than our rookie left tackle. I might say that. But to Swift, you didn't even mention Swift. Our scat back really should be a third down back type of guy in space. Yes, you got him outside. But to your point, again, the rookie out there who clearly looked like he was a deer in headlights all night. And that wasn't the only questionable call, Bill. We haven't even talked about that, but there were multiple calls throughout the game, third down, fourth down, where it was head scratching, and the ship for me has sailed on Thomas Brown being a potential option long ago, based on a lot of what I'm seeing because of his decision making and play calling. But no, it started off rough and it continued.
Yeah. And that's where I was going with this, is that we should, if we hadn't crossed Thomas Brown off the list, after San Francisco, he has definitely been crossed off the list now. He's still going to get an interview, and that's fine, but the name is not under consideration. And the other thing that really bothered me, which I don't like this happens in like high school football. The fact that Doug Kramer didn't report as an eligible, it's just like, and I know Aikman and Buck are just like, well, they must not have told him. He hasn't done this in a while. Like, he's been in a lot. So that's why I said maybe this is more on the player and not on the coach. I don't know exactly what happened, but Doug Kramer has been in at fullback for I don't know how many plays this year. It's a lot. It's I don't think you can count him on two hands. I think it's more than that. And he has to know he's got to go up to the official and report. Yeah. So, I think it's more on the player, but at the same time, the coaching staff, they need to make sure he know. That's, Doug, you're going in as an eligible player. Have to make sure he's reminded of that. I don't know exactly what happened with that communication, but that is, it wiped the touchdown off the board. If there was any chance the Bears were going to come back in that one, they needed those 7 points, and that just was absolutely soul crushing.
Yeah. Change his damn number to 44 if you're going to play him at fullback all year. But the fact that you have a fullback who's really a lineman that's so accustomed to playing fullback that he doesn't even think that he's doing anything special to report to the judge is indicative of our season and the team and coaching. So I'm with you. It's definitely player, but it's also coach. The offensive line coach. What is his job on that play? Okay, the guys know what the play call is. They know they have to block. Oh, Doug's going in there. Hey, Doug, don't forget to – it's super basic stuff, man, that's been happening all year, and same shit, rinse and repeat.
Yeah, no, it's getting really difficult here. And while we're on the coaching staff, let's talk a little bit about Washington on the defensive side. And I don't need me to crush the guy. He came in here. He wasn't going to be a defensive play caller. That was going to be Eberflus's job. You figure Eberflus had the idea that he was going to all this year, maybe even next year, eventually hand the reins over to him for defensive play calling. And he just abruptly got the job here when Eberflus got fired. But some of this soft stuff that he's called, it felt like going back to the early season in 2023 when Eberflus just sat in soft zones the whole time and let quarterbacks pick them apart on third down. Their third down defense was atrociously soft. And this is a secondary that we were supposed to be able to hold our, put our hats on as Bears fans. And this is the kind of secondary the Bears need. People were already comparing them to the Legion of Doom there with, or Boom, whatever the hell, the Seattle Seahawks. Right. People were all pumped about this. I was pumped about this secondary.
Yeah, me too.
This secondary plays soft. Tyreek Stevenson is a mess. I'm sure we're going to get into that play in the end zone. Kyler Gordon's not covering well. Jonathan Owens is celebrating on times where he should not be celebrating. You lost your backup job to Elijah Hicks, Jonathan. Settle down. Go watch some gymnastics tape. There's enough going on at this point where this secondary, I don't even have that much confidence in what elite level it's going to be at next year, let alone the rest of this year.
It's not just them either. I mean, it's the whole back seven. Those linebackers, both of them, have looked victimized, out of place, and a step too slow, or just not quite on the same page with the rest of the team, and as far as where they're supposed to be in coverage. And it's way too soft. There's too many zones all the time. That to me seems like it comes with being a Bears fan. Is a soft third down defense with too much, like that just seems to be applicable to what we're used to seeing throughout our whole fandom, at least the last decade plus. But yeah, it's maddening, man. And it's, yeah, Eric Washington, was hoping for a little bit more, but clearly Flus maybe had a little bit more success than we gave him credit for calling the defensive plays. Too bad we couldn't demote him there and promote somebody else to head coach. But
yeah. Look, to be fair to Matt Eberflus, the defense ran better when he was here. Like that's it. Like Matt Eberflus needs to be criticized, needed to lose his job, but the defense was certainly better when he was here. And let's talk about Tyreek Stevenson. I brought him up. Obviously, the defensive pass interference, like it just. I mean, just literally just shoved. Like it wasn't, it was just a ridiculous play. And I love the fact that he gets up and was like the who me attitude.
Right.
You know, he tripped Jamison Williams in the Detroit game at Thanksgiving when he wasn't even in the game and the sidelines. We know, obviously, the asinine crap he pulled with Washington. And this isn't just like the attitude issues of Stevenson. But, you know, and every once in a while he flashes a play. You see the skills about what he was flashing second half of his rookie season and early on in this year too.
Turnovers.
Yeah. But the bottom line here is like he is out of place a lot. He is he gives this guys way too much space. He's getting picked on a lot. Like this is a situation. I don't know if a new defensive coordinator next year is going to be able to pull something out of him, but like I was excited coming into this year what Stevenson was going to be, and he looked like, you know, he gets the pick 6 week 1 against the Titans. Looks like he's growing and going in the right direction. I don't know what happened at the bye. We have taken a hard left turn to the point I don't know if this is going to get better. It's not going to get better this year. Not only does he have attitude issues, and then, you know, everyone said, oh, he's going to grow up after the Washington mistake. He's going to grow up. No, he hasn't. And his play on the field is getting demonstrably worse. He is a liability when he's out there.
Oh, for sure. And I think it was that Washington game, Bill. I think, and it's more so how he was coached and enabled since that point. You know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And they did not keep him accountable. The fact that he has, you know, he sat for a couple plays that following game. And then he has started every game and continued to get starter share of reps every single game, despite continued boneheaded, liable mistakes that he has made, is on the coaches. It's not even his fault anymore. He's still a young kid. Was he like 23? It's still up to the coaches to help mold him as a human being. And he has not been given those chances to grow. And so that's on the coaches. Now, he should not be in there. And I would be shocked if when our new head coach comes in next year, if Tyreek Stevenson is a starter. At least he would have to earn it from a disciplined camp and, you know, battle with Terrell Smith. But he does not deserve to be the starter right now in so many different ways. And the fact he keeps on getting those reps and the lion's share of reps, that's on the coaches. And I don't know why they decide to do it, but, you know, at some point you got to show me why you earn it. And he's continued to do the opposite.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk a little bit about Caleb Williams. I'm going to toss it to you first. I know I've been given takes originally here. I want to kind of get your thoughts on Caleb Williams today. Obviously, he had a few opportunities where the line gave him a lot of time to play, and he couldn't find a guy open down the field. And then Troy Aikman showing you, well, he's missed Odunze over the middle here. He's missed DeAndre Swift. So, like, he wasn't seeing the field amazingly well today. Certainly not going to defend that. But where were you with Caleb with his performance overall? He did have a couple nice darts out there. How do you think he played with kind of all the elements, positive and negative, around him?
Overall, I think it was a plus game for Caleb. I think it's documented he missed some throws or didn't see some throws. Obviously, he's playing with happy feet. I mean, that hit he took on the blindside sack to Grenard from Amagaje that was a brutal hit. And if you watch that, he stayed on the ground for a bit. That one, he felt that one. And so as a quarterback, you have to start getting quicker clock in your head to get rid of the ball. With that said, even towards the end, I mean, there was a Rome Odunze drop in the end zone that was on the money, and he threw a few of those. I think Keenan Allen had 3 drops himself tonight. And these are professionals, highly touted. The reason why Caleb was mentioned amongst the all-time greats as far as what they've come into as a rookie is these receivers. And all 3 of them let him down, and they have let him down multiple times. I'm not saying he's immune to any criticism or has done everything right. No, he did, like I said, miss some throws. His clock is going too fast. He's not read the play quite well. But when he's given them opportunities to make plays, they haven't made plays. And that's what this season has been about. It's one person's doing well and the other person drops the ball. Or that person's finally doing well and then that other person drops the ball. Nobody is playing on the same page all year. And the same goes for Caleb and his receivers, which is super disappointing considering the talent that they have and the expectations and hopes we had as fans. But overall, I think it was a plus game. He showed poise, toughness, grit and desire throughout the game, which is not something you see from these Bears all year, especially lately. And he did what he could to put us in position. But when you're playing with this offensive line up front, especially in the interior and the defensive line up front, it's a disadvantageous position for any quarterback to be in, let alone a rookie.
Yeah, and look, I don't think I'd call it a plus game. I'm not going to argue with plus game, but I would agree it was not a negative game.
Right.
I'm just going to call it kind of a neutral game. That's where I am with it. And I've been a huge Caleb Williams supporter, and I'm still a huge Caleb Williams supporter. It's not a knock on him. I agree with you. The drops and some of the I don't even know what the word is. Almost like the unprofessional offensive strategy and how the receivers are running routes and stuff. Like, I used to get really annoyed with Bears fans over Mitch Trubisky. And it wasn't just, I was in on Trubisky early on, and I was like, this just isn't going to work out. I was pumped. I thought he played great in the Eagles playoff game, but it eventually I was just like, there's enough errors here that Bears fans were ignoring and just going, right. Oh, well, Allen Robinson dropped that ball. Oh, well, Anthony Miller dropped that ball. They could have had 7 points if they would have caught that ball. They would have had, 1st and 10 from the 12. Like those type of things. And I'm just like, guys, like we're isolating too much here to try and give Trubisky. Oh, he didn't have enough time on that 3rd and 6. Like it was always isolating like 4 Excuses. Plays. I'm like, he's got to overcome that stuff.
Right.
But with Caleb here, like you said, like the drop passes here, and some of the route concepts and what they're doing, like it's just a whole big giant ball of mess. And it's got to be really hard for this guy. And this is the one thing, and everyone I talk to, if you want to have success with a young quarterback, he has to trust his offensive line.
Right.
And you brought up the happy feet, and you see it. And that happy feet did not exist early in the season. I did not. Every once in a while, maybe I did not see it. He was a lot more relaxed back there, even after getting crushed by the Texans and some of those bad games early on that the offensive line had. But they gave him enough time, especially against Jacksonville and Carolina. The Rams, it was pretty good if memory serves. Like the confidence was getting built up, and it has just been game after game of him just getting destroyed. Yeah. He does not trust his protection anymore, and he won't trust his. It doesn't matter. They could have a perfect game, the offensive line, and no pressures against the Lions. He still will not trust that offensive line against Seattle and Green Bay. His mind is shot. He needs a fresh offensive line and a fresh offensive coordinator, offensive system in here. He is seeing ghosts. He's got the happy feet. He does not trust the protection. So on top of that, when he's not getting plays out immediately, when they're not rolling him out at all, when they're not trying to do things and make it easy for him, the play action rollout to Cole Kmet, perfect suggestion there. Like things you can do to try and make it easy for him, try and open it up in play action. The Bears never do play action. We all sit here as fans, analysts, Doesn't matter. Like, why don't the Bears do play action? It doesn't matter what coach is in here. I don't know. It's George McCaskey. We're never running play action. You think my grandfather would have run play action?
Or slants.
Like, I don't understand why they don't do it. But regardless, what has, like, Thomas Brown, you could say, is doing a better job than Shane Waldron did the last few weeks of his tenure. Fine. Yeah. But that's like what Jeff Berkes always says. The bar is on the floor, and all we did is step over it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And then, I mean, to make it even worse, it's when for some miraculous moment, the offensive line does protect and the receivers do catch it and he makes the throw. There's a effing penalty that wipes it off the board, whether it's pre-snap or post-snap. There's a damn penalty. And it's just such a maddening conclusion every single game with the comedy of errors that, it's such a creative mess that we live in as Bears fans. It's nothing but new ways of depression. But it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, from a Caleb standpoint. It seems like, from a Bears standpoint. But this is rough, Bill. This is rough to be, sharing some fresh thoughts after that loss, that depressing visitor experience, fresh off the season we've had. We just took this team to overtime 3 weeks ago, took them to overtime and should have won that damn game and came out tonight looking super flat. The one thing I'll say is we seem to have a decent handle on Justin Jefferson. I think the way that we handle and cover him seems to be somewhat effective. Obviously, Jordan Addison, is a baller against us, and we don't know how to stop Hawkinson on third down. He just eats up first on us all the time. But Justin Jefferson, we've actually somewhat controlled, contained. Like the years with Barry, you can't stop him, you can contain him. We've done a decent job with Jefferson. But the problem is, we don't have an offense that can do crap on the other side. And, we let Aaron Jones continue to dominate all the time against us and Hawkinson get over when he wants to, when it's most important, and make Jordan Addison look like a wide receiver one for the rest of the league. But, there's not much positives to take away here. I got one, and that is, I think his name's Jonathan Ford, the Packer practice squad player we picked up. Yeah, he gets my game ball, Bill. He gets my game ball. He actually plugged some holes, held up some double teams. He looked decent. He looks like our best defensive tackle right now, period. Maybe our best defensive lineman. So he gets my game ball, if there is one, loser game ball. Here you go, Jonathan Ford, number 64.
Yeah, look, and that's the thing. Trying to find small positives out of here. Like you said, they do a pretty good job on Justin Jefferson. Yeah, they did a pretty good job on Justin Jefferson. And the one thing, like you said, and I do a player props article every week, three player props. Went 2-1 again. So the record I think is 26-13. Doing well if you want to make some money. Yeah. Look for my player props article. But the thing is, and I noticed this, and I don't know how far back I can go because trying to find player props from week 5 is an impossibility. But it was right around after the bye, after the Washington game, when I'm like, they really can't stop the run. And every week, literally every week since the Washington game, starting with Arizona, with James Connors, New England, Ramondre Stevenson, all the way through, one of my player props, you go look at every article, has been over for the opposing running back on rushing yards. And it is hit every week. Every week. The running back. I picked David Montgomery over Jahmyr Gibbs against Thanksgiving, and Monty went over in the first half. They cannot stop the run. It is brutal. For a team that you could not run against this team last year. Yeah. They were fantastic against the run last year. They are embarrassingly bad at it. It is not Washington's fault necessarily. Eberflus, it's the whole system has broken down. It's pathetic. And this defensive line, I had more concerns about the defensive line than the offensive line. Yeah, not for the front, the top four, Billings and Sweat and Dexter and Walker, I thought would be okay. There was nothing behind them.
Right.
And those guys only should be playing 60, 70% of the snaps. No depth. They relied way too much on Zach Pickens and Austin Booker that they were going to be legitimate guys here. Pickens is awful. Booker, 5th round defensive end that needs to add weight. You shouldn't have relied on him for anything this year. And again, this goes to, and I think where we're about to pivot to, because I think we've talked about this game long enough, is Ryan Poles and roster construction. You talked about it at the beginning of this podcast, the post-game show, the trenches. We're going to get to the offensive side of the ball with Amagaji here in a second. Let's talk about the defensive trenches, not like how they were in this game, but what they have been this season, because it's just not cutting it, and it's not cutting it. I don't think it's a scheme problem. I think it is simply there is not enough talent. There is not enough depth to be able to stop the run in the second half, and these teams are constantly running over this defensive line.
Yeah. No, I mean, I gave my game ball to a practice squad player that we just picked up from the Packers. I'm not joking. I think he played our best defensive tackle position tonight by far. He was a practice squad player on the Packers last weekend, and now he is our best interior defender. And that, if that doesn't tell you how shitty of a defensive line that we have constructed, like you said, Billings is a stud. Dexter, I really like what I'm seeing out of Dexter's second year, but the fact that you don't have anything decent behind that is a cardinal sin, especially in this league. There's so much talent out there. Remember, not too long ago, the Eagles, I'm just reminded of when they picked up Ndamukong Suh in his latter years with Linval Joseph, and they had all these guys at the end of their bench on the defensive line. Why? Because the trenches is where it matters, where you stop teams, whether it's the run or a little bit of pressure here and there, and we've got nothing. And so if you can pick up a practice squad player who's better than our guys, how come we haven't invested more with maybe higher dollars with some defensive front players? It's inexcusable. And I will say this, though, regardless of who's the next GM, it is so clear to anybody who watches our games what our holes are. I have confidence that they're going to fill it. Whomever the next GM is, you're going to fill the defensive tackle spot, the interior offensive line spot. It's not too hard to figure that out. And I do feel like Ryan Poles has been perhaps too calculated in his approach to address each offseason, given the available resources in the draft that specific year and free agency that specific year. I think he's been too frugal and not been convicted enough, too conservative, and that's come to bite him in the butt. But I do think that he has positioned it knowing that the trenches are going to be dealt with this offseason, which is why I do feel like next year has always been our year to finally compete instead of this year. While I do think wild card was a realistic expectation to start the year, our holes are going to get filled this offseason, but it is glaring how big of a hole they are.
All right, so we're going to talk Ryan Poles now. So we're going to have a little exercise. I'm going to ask you some questions here. Just give me one-word answers. You don't have to explain them. I'm just going to ask you, who would you rather have on these players? Would you rather have David Montgomery for $6 million a year or DeAndre Swift for $8 million a year?
Money.
Okay. Would you rather have Darnell Mooney for $13 million a year or Keenan Allen for $24 million a year?
Mooney.
All right. Would you rather have Nate Davis for $10 million a year or James Daniels for $8 million a year?
James Daniels.
Would you rather have Roquan Smith for $20 million a year or Tremaine Edmonds for $18 million a year?
Rowe. I gotta go Rowe. That's a tough one, though.
Okay. So either way, even on some of the ones you had to think about, these are all, and I'm not saying it was like direct. It wasn't like, all right, Monty's gone, Swift is the next signing.
Right.
But like, basically, these are decisions Ryan Poles has made over the last 2 years. Or, well, 3 years if you want to go back, like James Daniels. Like, he came in, he goes, I don't want to keep James Daniels. A year later, he brings in Nate Davis. James Daniels had a pretty good stretch there with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Nate Davis, we don't need to get into it. Like, all these decisions, like pretty much the guys he let go and replace, I haven't remembered a GM, and this is the one thing that people haven't really talked about, is the decisions of the players he decided to let go versus the players he decided to bring in. And I understand like Roquan Smith netted him a second-round pick. I'm not ignoring all the things. Now, again, he needed the second-round pick because he lit the other one on fire with Chase Claypool. Yeah. But like, I understand there were other benefits to those things. And I'm not saying like the trade for Keenan Allen was bad, but they had to make the trade for Keenan Allen because Darnell Mooney wanted the hell out of here because he wasn't getting the football.
So did Monty.
Yeah. So like, these are the situations that Ryan Poles created, and then he has replaced players he let walk out the door in a lot of cases, and maybe in arguably almost every case, with a lesser player in return. And you know what that does? That takes a roster that Ryan Pace had at the end of his tenure, which was not good. From 2018 to 2021, it fell off hard. He did not know how to maintain that roster. And in a lot of ways, I know we sit there and go, oh, well, he's got this guy and this guy. Like, we're focusing on, you need to build a roster that's 30 or 40 deep if you're really going to compete. And a lot of Bears fans who want to be supportive of Ryan Poles are focusing on the 7 or 8 guys he's brought in that are working really well and ignoring like the other positions where he steadily made them worse. And a lot of the misses where the Bears just don't have depth because he's not hitting on the guys he needs to hit on.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, there's no defense to that, really. I think if there was one, it's salary cap and draft picks, and that building for the future. But when you continue to not have a product on the field to show that your investment was wise, it's not defensible, and that's where we're at right now with Ryan Poles.
Yeah, it's really bad. And I'll bring up Amagaji here. And I tweeted out, I try when I'm doing post-game shows, I try to stay off Twitter during the game because I don't want to burn through all my opinions during the game. But I saw Bears fans were crushing Amagaji all night, just crushing him. And I get it. He was awful. The sack where Grenard almost murdered Caleb Williams, like, he did not touch him. Just did not touch him, by the way. And Darnell Wright, who I still like, but Dallas Turner, that was like his 8th tackle and his 2nd sack of the season. He can't even get on the field. And Wright, he just smoked Darnell Wright on that. That was bad. But back to Amagaji. Yeah. Amagaji, he had the multiple penalties. And those holding penalties, he is just oh, I'm done. And he just tackled defensive players because he knew he was getting burnt. All the mistakes he made all night long.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I had more professional time this draft season than I've ever had in my life. So I dove into a lot of tape and tried to get my big board up to 100 people. And I talked to EJ Snyder and Brett Coleman and Jacob Infante and a lot of these guys that know a lot about the drafts. And I'm bouncing ideas off and I'm kind of seeing where I'm at. And I was pretty happy with my top 100. And Amagaji did not make my top 100. I watched him and, so I can't tell you he would have been 104, but he probably would have been in the 120s or 130s. I thought he was a stretch at 75, but I get it. He's long. He's got agile feet. He's got all these tools. And I think Ryan Poles looks at offensive linemen and goes, oh, look at all these tools. We can develop him into some kind of elite tackle. And he's going to come from the 3rd round. Everyone's going to pat me on the back and be look at the guy that Ryan Poles found with pick 75 in the 3rd round. Instead of sometimes sitting there going, I need more interior offensive line help. I need to get a guy like Dominic Pudi, who's doing phenomenal with the 49ers and was available there. Or Christian Haynes or some of the Zach Zinter hasn't done much, but there were a lot of good interior offensive linemen at that point, and he ignored them all to take a project tackle in the 3rd round. And here's the thing that beyond that, if you're going to commit to a project tackle, it's one of 2 things happened here. Either one, Ryan Poles thought that once Amagaji got healthy this offseason, that he was going to be good enough to be a swing tackle coming from Yale and a season where he was injured and missed the last month of the season, which I did not see that on tape. And I'm not trying to pretend that I'm some brilliant analyst here, draft analyst. No, I'm not. That was the first time I really dove in the draft tape. And I saw it, which means Ryan Poles should have seen it. So either 1, he didn't see it, and that's a problem, or 2, he did see it, knew that he should have Amagaji redshirted for this year, but his plan was just to have Larry Borum or Matt Pryor, who now he bumped inside and refuses to bump back outside. He did not have a plan at swing tackle that was going to keep his rookie quarterback, number 1 overall, safe if Braxton Jones or Darnell Wright missed time. And Braxton Jones missed time last year. Braxton Jones misses time. That happens. Like, you've got to have a good swing tackle in place, and he didn't.
Yeah.
Y'all knew what Larry Borum was.
Yeah.
So, like, you look at here and you look at what Ryan Poles is doing for roster construction.
Yeah.
And there's just holes everywhere where you
Right.
sit there and go, why didn't you see that?
Yeah. No, I think it's option B. I think he knew that he should have been a project and a red shirt, and he thought the moves he made were sufficient. He thought Larry Borum would not be as terrible, that Chris Morgan would be a better coach and would have coached up his deficiencies. He thought Matt Pryor would have been a swing tackle, and he, at the time, thought Nate Davis was a plug-and-play guard with Ryan Bates coming in there, could also possibly kick. He thought all these options were good enough. And now he's in a position where Larry Borum legit looks like a high school player out there with his so that's almost more dangerous and risky for your rookie quarterback to put Larry Borum out there than this toolsy kid who's been healthy for a couple weeks now, even though he's been even hurt since he got back in the league. I think he thought his plans were better, and he's learning that they weren't, which hopefully is a humble realization for him. But we'll see if he keeps the job.
Yeah, and if he keeps the job, that is a huge question at this point. Now, on my podcast last week, a couple people asked me in the mailbag, is Ryan Poles safe? And I said, based on Kevin Warren's comments, and again, this may be the Bears organization doing things in a broken way, like they tend to do. Right. Kevin Warren sitting there next to Ryan Poles going, Ryan Poles is the general manager, and he is going to lead the search for the next head coach, only to potentially fire him a month later. Would have just sit there. I'm like, that's not going to happen. That was like too much of a vote of confidence for me to say he's not going to be the GM. But then when Dan Wiederer comes out with a piece, and when I say this, I want you to know that I have no idea if this is accurate. But Dan Wiederer he covered the Minnesota Vikings. And he covered the Minnesota Vikings when Kevin Warren was there. I am not saying that is his source. But if it is, that is Kevin Warren clearly trying to change the perception on Ryan Poles for a potential change at general manager. And Kevin Warren, who I am a supporter of, even though a lot of Bears fans don't like him, this is a guy who, as the Big Ten commissioner, shook hands with the Pac-12 and the Big 12, and they made their little pact that they were going to fight against the SEC and stay together so there could remain to be these conferences. And they had their pact. And Kevin Warren looked around at the landscape and called Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA and said, why don't you join the Big Ten and we'll be just as big as the SEC? They said, sounds good. Ditch the Pac-12. He murdered the Pac-12. Kevin Warren is why the Pac-12 died. He stabbed them in the back. So the people were like, Kevin Warren's kind of a stooge. I don't think he would stab Ryan Poles in the back like that. My ass is what I'll say to that. Now, again, I don't know if it happened, but it absolutely could have happened. And again, you don't want to see that level of dysfunction in the front office of your football team. But I will say, if Kevin Warren is sitting here going, we've got Caleb Williams, and I was here for drafting Caleb Williams. I want him to quarterback this football team, but I was not here for the decision for Matt Eberflus. I was not here for the decision for Ryan Poles. I do not think that the way we came about that decision as a franchise was intelligent, hiring 80-year-old Bill Polian to go find his friends jobs. He may just want to put his stamp on this team completely, and it may mean the death of Ryan Poles. And that Wiederer article was alarming in a lot of ways. Yeah, it could be. And I think he's a businessman. And I think, similar to Poles, I think he hoped and felt his decisions would have fared better by this point, but they haven't. And I think he's going to keep his options open. I hope that he doesn't
prohibit himself from hiring the head coach we need because they want to bring in their own GM. I would be 1,000% in favor of bringing in of aligning a GM with a head coach. If a head coach said, for instance, like you pointed out last week, maybe a Ray Agnew to come with Ben Johnson, that would, to me, I'd be totally fine with that. I could see both ways. I do think that's the only way that we get a new GM is if a head coach comes in and says he wants one. But to your point, like he gave that vote of confidence. I don't think it's the word of the Bible. I don't think it's going to be an infallible truth until the next season. I think he'll do what is best for the Bears. Thankfully, we'll see if he ends up proving to be poor at his job as well as everybody else is. But we'll see.
Yeah, no, it's obviously this is going to be a fascinating offseason for the Bears, and honestly a fascinating last few weeks when we see what happens with Ryan Poles, because that's the thing, like the one, to me, like a lot of the stuff with the coaching and making sure that Poles was on the hook for Matt Eberflus, I thought was very telling, because the public perception has been that, at which is easy to get there when Jim Caldwell and Eberflus and Dan Quinn were finalists before Ryan Poles was hired,
right? Where
Ryan Poles basically said, well, you just got to pick one of these three guys. And oh, by the way, he picked the Trace Armstrong client, which he is as well. Trace Armstrong gets a lot of credit for flushing this team down the toilet the last 5 years with Matt Nagy and Poles and Eberflus, all his tentacles all over this thing. But tying Poles to Eberflus was interesting. And I also thought what was interesting was the Nate Davis thing, which of course I came out critical of Nate Davis immediately when they hired him because of some stuff I had heard about him in Tennessee. And the one thing in that article that I thought was really fascinating was the Weeder saying, despite strong objections from the coaching staff, Ryan Poles went out and signed Nate Davis anyway. And what was interesting, when that signing was made, Luke Steckel was on the Bears coaching staff at the time. And I am sure, it's not like I heard this from Dan, but I'm confident when Dan's talking about objections from the coaching staff, it was Luke Steckel. And why is that important? Because Luke Steckel was on the Titans coaching staff for like the last 7 years before that. So he had worked specifically with Nate Davis. So if you have a coach that you have brought in as part of your organization, and you are thinking about making a free agent signing, and that coach is saying, don't do it. He has horrible football character. He's always saying something hurts and he can't play and he's got issues and he's not a good teammate. And you go, oh, I'm Ryan Poles. I've got my great culture. That was Mike Vrabel's culture, who now we're talking about bringing in to fix the Bears culture. Mike Vrabel's culture couldn't handle Nate Davis, but suddenly Ryan Poles is going to handle it. Like, that's the kind of decision-making process where I'm not looking at just that specific thing, but what other kind of decisions has Ryan Poles made where he's just like, I don't care what other opinions have been given to me, informed opinions about other players, that I'm just going to go ahead and do these things. That's a really dangerous direction to have a GM go, where he's ignoring what others are telling him from a place of informed opinion and going, I'm going to do what I want to do anyway. That is not how you make the best decisions for the football team that you're running.
Arrogant for sure. And you already alluded to the Chase Claypool thing. Very similar. Chase had a reputation before we traded a second round pick for him, and he did it anyway.
Steelers fans celebrated that trade. Celebrated it.
Yeah. I mean, did you see the Deontay Johnson thing today? He has been excused from team activities, mutually. I mean, if you don't do well in that culture, if the Steelers want to get rid of you, that's a red flag. And he has, you're right. He has, kind of overlooked some things. I think he's been a little bit more over his head, a little arrogant, and hopefully he's had his fair share of humble pie, which he should have had this year. We'll see. I still think, we've had how many 1-loss games this year, Bill? We've had too many. And, we still have talent on both sides of the ball. I think if you beef up the trenches, I think this team competes with the roster we have for a deep playoff run, honestly. Obviously, we need more coaches in there, and that's the one thing that's been the most disappointing about Thomas Brown is it's more than just a head coach like we thought. A coach at any level is only as good as their assistants, and unfortunately, our assistants are deep and they're bad.
Yeah, no, it's a big mess there, and we're going to wrap up here in just a couple minutes. If anyone's got any questions they want to drop in the comments section, do it now here before we wrap up. We'll get to them. But you're bringing up a guy like when I brought up my idea about Ray Agnew, and if you search my Twitter, you'll see I had a poll question and then kind of gave the reasoning behind it. I'll do it again here in a second. But what I think is interesting, and you brought that up, is the idea about, if you don't want the GM to get in the way of hiring the right coach. And both things are interesting about the two guys right now, whether it's fan oriented or media, driven from the media, it doesn't matter. But the two names right now, it feels like a 2-horse race, even though guys like Joe Brady or Liam Cohen, going to get interviews. It feels like it's Mike Vrabel or Ben Johnson for this job. It's just right now that just feels what it's going to be. And Mike Vrabel, one of the big things I had when I said that I didn't think Mike Vrabel would be seriously considered, like I didn't think this was going to be a guy they would hire, is because Mike Vrabel is not going to come to a team where he's got president and then GM and then him, and he's 3 steps away from ownership. But if he's brought in a partnership with a general manager where the president is speaking for the chairman, that's a whole different ball of wax there with Vrabel if Ryan Poles isn't there. Ben Johnson Albert Breer, I don't remember even which game it was at this point, but Albert Breer, was it before Thanksgiving? Doesn't matter. Albert Breer talking about Ben Johnson before, on an Amazon game and saying Ben Johnson wants alignment between GM and head coach. And people are saying, well, maybe Ben Johnson just wants to make sure Ryan Poles is extended if he takes the Bears job. But Brian, it also could be Ben Johnson. That's kind of Ben Johnson saying, I want to come in with Ray Agnew. So suddenly you're looking at maybe 2 potential coaches that that Kevin Warren might be very interested in and may see Ryan Poles as a roadblock into bringing those guys to Hallis Hall.
Yeah. And wouldn't it be such Bears for us to go get a Josh McCown because he'll get with our current GM and not bring in his own guy? It's we'll see what happens. It's tough to screw up. Troy Aikman said it tonight in the broadcast. It should be an offensive minded coach and do whatever it takes to get that offensive coach. If it means bringing a new GM, had Ryan Poles done a fantastic job, then there would be no question about whether or not he should stay, with a new head coach. But he hasn't. So if Ben Johnson comes in and says, I want to bring in Ray Agnew, hey, look what we have done in Detroit. We have completely turned around this cellar-dwelling franchise and turned them into a powerhouse with our assets and culture that we've created, including the staff. We want to do it here. We know what it takes. We want to bring Caleb and crew to the next step. You do it, and you say bye to Ryan Poles. But it's been a lot of head scratching moments, and who knows, man? We were led to believe it was only the stadium that he was going to be dealing with, and all of a sudden it looks like he's involved a little bit more. Which I'm glad him as opposed to our boy Ted, but. It's still a disconcerting phase for Bears fans to be in.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I always thought that Warren was going to have a bigger role than just the stadium, because and here's the thing: you may not like Kevin Warren, and I get that. He can rub you the wrong way, whatever you want to say about that. But again, if Kevin Warren's not making these calls, that means George McCaskey is.
Right.
And we already know George McCaskey can't make those calls. So let's try something different before we give up on it. So we got a couple of questions here, so we'll wrap up with those. But again, just if you hadn't heard, the idea I had with bringing in Ben Johnson was you bring in Ben Johnson and Ray Agnew together from Detroit. That's what the Giants tried, failed. What the Giants tried with Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, taking them both from Buffalo. You bring both those guys in from Detroit. Now, you got to build a staff, and Ben Johnson hasn't been in a ton of places. but here's where you can build a staff. Ben Johnson brings Hank Fraley. Hank Fraley is the offensive line coach of the Lions. A lot of people love him, say he's kind of a guru. You make him the offensive coordinator, run game coordinator, whatever. So you give him a promotion, but he's still going to have his hands on that offensive line while Ben Johnson is calling the plays. So that builds that up at that point. Obviously, you got to fill out the QB coach and wide receiver coach. That they'd have to work on together as a team. But beyond that, Ben Johnson's agent is the same agent. There's two guys out there that he's the same agent for, Brandon Staley and Robert Saleh. You could bring in one of those guys. I think Saleh probably would make more sense. Staley's over with the Rams right now. I'm sure he's having a good time over there with Sean McVay. He's not the defensive coordinator, but he's still part of the staff. You bring in a guy like Robert Saleh, you use the agent connection to bring him in. And I'll even throw another one in for fun, which I didn't even think about. Darren Rizzi, who everyone's loving in New Orleans right now. I'm not saying he should be a head coach, but he was a special teams coordinator in New Orleans. He worked with Ben Johnson for several years in Miami. So maybe you can bring in even a guy like that has some leadership type personality to him and everything. And suddenly I think you've built a pretty damn good staff and a lot of synergy on that staff with a bunch of guys that can work together. Saleh's got leadership capabilities. Obviously, he's been a head coach. Rizzi's been an interim head coach. So if you're all worried about culture building with Ben Johnson, who's obviously going to have picked up some things from Dan Campbell, you can put together a pretty good coaching staff, Brian, with Agnew in there that I think may work if the Bears are trying to really turn things on a head at Halas Hall.
Oh yeah, I would love that. I would be thrilled with that result if it happens. We'll see. I would love it to happen.
All right, so let's wrap up with some of these questions. We'll start here. We'll just go in order. First one from Chris Armstrong. Any concerns about the Bears if they have to switch from back to a 3-4 from a 4-3? To that, Chris, I would say no for two reasons. And then Brian, I'll see if you agree. One, nickel packages in a 3-4 and a 4-3 are very similar, and the nickel packages are what's out there 75% of the time. Also, switching back to a base 3-4, you can easily have Montez Sweat. I'm pretty confident could be outside as an outside linebacker. I think that's fine. They would need another outside linebacker on the other side there, another edge. But I think Edmonds and Edwards could both play inside linebacker there without an issue. Andrew Billings just screams nose tackle. Like he's played that before. That's not a problem. DeMarcus Walker has played 5-tech before. That's not a problem. And I think Javon Dexter actually might be able to bust some heads out there as a 5-tech as well, especially with his ability to rush the passer. So I actually think this front seven converts pretty damn well from a 4-3 to a 3-4. Again, they need one more edge out there. Maybe Austin Booker could be a 3-4 edge. I don't know. But overall, I think they would convert pretty well if they had to switch that for a new defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I think Dexter would be a stud 5 technique. Honestly, I think Billings, same thing. And that's the thing. Our defensive line, we need so much help up front anyway. Regardless of 4-3, 3-4, we're going to have to plug in new guys. So you bring in new guys that fit a different scheme, and that's not a problem. Honestly, I think Edmonds could potentially be an outside backer in a 3-4. I think you put Sanborn in the inside with TJ, and I think that's a decent inside group too. But yeah, I'm not as concerned about that. I think Sweat's got that versatility. He could be a 5-tech or an outside backer. But we got to beef up our trenches anyway, so you can get the guys you need. So I think that's a good problem to have if we get a guy like Saleh in there for sure.
Yeah, and they're going to have a top 10 pick. It's not going to be like 4th, but it's going to be 7, 8, 9, 10.
Right.
You're going to be able to get a good edge there if you need one that you want to be able to put out there. James Pierce, I don't know if he's going to be a top 10 guy. You got to see how things, from Tennessee, that he screams stand up outside edge, guys like that. So there's going to be guys available to kind of round that out. Like you said, you bring in a couple different guys. You can, the guys that can switch, the guys that don't, see you later. You weren't playing that well anyway, clearly,
right, exactly.
or we'd have something else going on here. So again, yeah, I agree. I think it can be converted. Let's do this one here from Jason Black. How do you extend Poles off his resume to match the new Bears coach? I don't see how Ben Johnson will sign up with Poles after how he has built this team. No team in the 4th year should have $82 million in cap space. And that's an interesting point, Jason. Like the one thing with the Keenan Allen trade, and this is why I was okay with the Keenan Allen trade, is, you know, I understand they're like, oh, how can you just give him $23 million to come in here and play wide receiver for 1 year, especially if you're not going to re-sign him. I was okay with it because they had this money burning a hole in their pocket, and all the major free agents were signed. Like, who else were you going to go out and get at that point? There was nobody. Yeah. So at least you're just trying to roll over $20 million into next year's cap. Like at some point, you got to spend the money you have. So I was fine with using Keenan Allen to utilize that money, but at the same time, Ryan Poles, and you want to say it's disciplined, or you want to say it's not understanding what you have to do with free agency. He does not go above certain players. He's got a threshold, and he does not go above it. And if it goes above it, he doesn't want to spend on it. Now, how Tremaine Edmonds wasn't above that threshold, I don't know, but I digress. But like, he's done that multiple times, and I know there's multiple players that he has pursued that weren't really reported that much, that he chose not to sign, right? And other teams paid more money, and those teams are very pleased with the product that those players are giving them. So with free agency, especially when you suck, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you get to call up free agents and be like, do you want to take less money and go win a Super Bowl? Right. That's what you get to do with your Chiefs. When you're the Bears and you've won 13 games in 3 years, you have to overpay for players. That's just how this works. You have to get them to chase the money. And yes, you can sell them on Caleb Williams and your roster building and all this stuff. But in the end, it's the dollars that are going to bring them there. And I don't know if Ryan Poles gets that. And I think might be a little too disciplined. And his bottom line here is, when you look at what Ryan Poles has done in free agency, it's a lot of meh. Yeah.
No, for sure. And it's a great question. I don't think you should be allowed to sit with 82 million. And I want to say he's learned, and this is going to be the year that he makes sure he signs some of these big fish and reels them into the boat. But, you know, I'm totally okay if they deem him not worthy of making that decision, because he's been way too conservative, and I think it's obvious, and hopefully he has learned it. But, you know, will he get that chance? I don't know that he should.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think that a lot of us are starting to realize here as we kind of work through this is, and maybe Ryan Poles realized it before the rest of us. Maybe he saw the writing on the walls after Matt Eberflus was fired. We all saw it on that press conference, that Kevin Warren took control of that press conference after Matt Eberflus was fired, talked very concisely about what they wanted, what direction they wanted to go. And that's why I said after that press conference, this is Kevin Warren's team. If you didn't realize it then, you better realize it now. And Ryan Poles sat there like a child that had just been scolded and was told to sit in the corner during his timeout. He had horrible body language. And we all sat there and said, well, you know, he's never had to fire someone before. He was uncomfortable having to answer questions like this. But you sit here and wonder, was Ryan Poles sitting there knowing the writing was on the walls, and he's sitting here going, this is really uncomfortable for me because I don't think I'm going to have a job here in a couple months.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it sucks. I think it sucks for everybody involved. And, you know, there's no way to sugarcoat that. You know, you saw him tonight in the game in his press box, you know, watching the game and wondering what he's thinking, but clearly, you know, he's dejected and disappointed. You know, I don't think he should be surprised if he gets canned, Bill. I don't. And I think, writing's on the wall for that, but hopefully they don't make the wrong decision and keep him despite having an opportunity to head coach like Ben Johnson. That would just be the most Bears thing ever, but we'll see, man.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up. Do you have any other thoughts? Anything we didn't get to, whether it's about Ryan Poles, you know, the whole landscape of this team, specifically about the game tonight and the another drubbing the Bears had. Somehow the Bears got their ass kicked, but because they got their ass kicked so badly by San Francisco, 30-12 seems like an upgrade. It was an upgrade. Like, it's really bad.
It was.
But any thoughts here as we end the podcast for the night?
I think we win next week against Detroit.
Wow, look at that. A man with confidence. I don't.
Yeah. Well, like you said, they're so beaten up right now.
They are.
And we play them well. It's at home. I think we sneak one. And I think Minnesota takes over the lead with that. I don't think we win another one after. Well, maybe we beat Seahawks too if Geno's still down. But yeah, there's not much confidence here. Who do you want in the first round? What position?
First round, like here's for me, it has to be trenches. I would be okay with an edge because if Bears sitting with like the 8th, 9th pick, that's a tough spot to grab a guard. Like Will Campbell, LSU, is a guy who I think is probably going to be a guard in this league for 10, 12 years and get some Pro Bowls. He's got short arms. So if Ryan Poles is still the GM, he's out, just cross him off the list. But like, I'd be fine if Will Campbell's the pick at 9 or whatever the Bears have. I'm okay with that because you need 2 new guards on this team. Like Tevin Jenkins, I love you, buddy. You're just not going to stay here. You're just not healthy enough. It's rough. I hope you go make some money, and I hope you go on to great success in your NFL career. But I just don't think it's going to be in Chicago. So they need a stud guard that they get in the draft, whether it's first round or in the second round. They're going to have 3 picks in the top 40, 41, and they need to go out and sign the best guard they can. Obviously, the guy at the top of the list right now is Trey Smith. I do think there's a good chance the Chiefs don't resign him for roster construction issues. Have already paid 3 offensive linemen big sums of money. So that's where I am. I'm okay if it's edge. If it's Mason Graham from Michigan, if he falls down to 7, 8, 9 and the Bears can grab him, do that's fine with me as well. Yeah. Like there's enough opportunities out there that the Bears can get an impact player and a player who can be an impact player in year 1 as a rookie. Yeah. It doesn't have to be like they have to take an offensive lineman or they have to take an interior defensive lineman. It just has to be somewhere in the trenches. And I would be fine if all 3 of those top 41, 42 picks were all trench picks.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. I think Will Campbell could be a tackle for us because I definitely think he could start over Braxton Jones. But I do think it wouldn't be a surprise if he kicks in the guard too. I prefer Kelvin Banks from Texas more so at tackle. But I'm with you, same thing, trenches. And I'm a former running back. I love Ashton Genty, but I hope we stay away from him until we beef up those trenches for sure.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, and we'll just do a quick thing here on the trenches. I know we're over an hour now, but with how Ryan Poles has approached this, Ryan Pace got crushed by Bears fans, and not Poles is as well for this. I'm not saying Poles hasn't been with his offensive line approach, but Bears fans just complained about Ryan Pace for years about his approach to the offensive line. And if you look at the two, the amount of similarities are wildly similar in their first few seasons, how they approach the offensive line. Like Cody Whitehair was, in terms of day 1, day 2 picks. Can I understand Darnell Wright's a top 10 pick? It's a much bigger investment, but Cody Whitehair was the only day 1, day 2 pick, first 3 drafts. And the other one was Hronis Grasu. So now you got Karan Amagaji and Hronis Grasu. You've got Cody Whitehair and Darnell Wright. They both made one free agent signing, Bobby Massey versus Nate Davis. Both of them ignored center. Like it's, both of them kept the Pace kept Kyle Long. Poles kept Tevin Jenkins. Like the amount of similarities here between the two and how they've approached this from one regime to the next. And both offensive lines were subpar. You would think you could learn something from your predecessor when you come over and look at the offensive line construction.
Yeah, it's terrible. Terrible, man. There's not much to say else. It's the truth. It's what it is.
Yeah. Like you can't, when you come in and say you're going to build the trenches and you ignore them for 3 years, you almost have signed your own pink slip at that point. Like,
and people are worried if he keeps a job that he's going to overspend. But I think he's going to be smart enough to do it on the line And if he overspends on the line with good players, because like you said, you can miss or overpay with good players, it's a lot easier to overlook. But if he can do it, get a Trey Smith and a Ryan Kelly and, maybe a Cam Robinson or something like that on the edge as well, I'm okay with that. Spend some money up front for once for change, and freaking get some guys in here that can bully some other teams for once.
100%. I mean, look, when the Bears were good, the last time they were really good, even the Lovey years, that offensive line was pretty good. And when the offensive line went to crap, Jay Cutler got his ass kicked, and that was the end of it. The 85 Bears, the 80s Bears, they were built on the offensive line. This is not a hard concept. It has been the same concept since George Halas was with Sid Luckman in the 40s. You need a damn offensive line, man. So it's frustrating. So let's wrap this up. That was a rough one. I don't even think I ever said the score. It was 30-12 Vikings. Who really cares? But the Bears lost another one. They have now lost 8 consecutive games, and they are headed to another top 10 pick in the draft.
Gosh.
Bryan, thanks so much for hanging out with me for the last hour. It was a lot of fun. Our first opportunity to work together. That was great. Unfortunately, we both thought when we said, let's do this post-game show several weeks ago, we thought it was going to be under much different circumstances, but hey, still get a chance to talk Bears, which I do somehow, I don't know, is it cathartic? I do find some benefit to it. Thanks for so much, for hanging out with me and for providing so much content.
You too. Cheers, man. Appreciate you.
All right. Bear down, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Adios.